born into slavery in Holly Springs, Mississippi, 1862. So of course both of her parents were slaves. Context is she was born during Reconstruction, right? Or just before Reconstruction. So she grew up having privileges that blacks had during that time frame before the Jim Crow laws. So to have a privilege and then have it taken away from you, that's a different type of mindset than, just never having it at all.
There's always been a tension, especially in our community, around what is the path to citizenship, first-class citizenship? Is it accommodation and respectability, or is it protest?
You see my great, 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 great,
One of the important things that she does is to help black people understand that you don't have to earn your first-class citizenship through respectability. Mm-hmm. It's natural rights. That's who you have the right to do it, and you better fight to keep it.
She was always about justice. Another thing happened 1884 on a rail car, which happened a couple of times, but the most noteworthy one, she was asked to, it was a ladies' car, which was the equivalent of first class. And Ida was a very distinguished woman, elegant, and, liked to dress. So, had a nice dress, was asked to go to the smoking car. She was like, no, I'm a lady. I've got a ladies' car ticket, so I'm going to stay right here. So the conductor, tried to remove her, put his hand on her, and she bit him, drew blood. And, right, so he had to go get 2 other men. So it took 3 men to forcibly remove her from the train. When that happened, the other passengers cheered. And she's like, And so what amazes me about Ida is that she always made the problems bigger than herself. So she's like, okay, I'm not going to go fight the conductor again. I'm going to sue the railroad. So a black woman in 1884 sued the Chesapeake Railroad and won $500. So the ultimate outcome is that 3 years later, 2.5 years later, that decision was reversed. Instead of winning $500, she had to pay $200. So again, just things that added fuel to her fire for having and serving justice.
What respectability will give you is certain social privileges. But it's not an agent of change.
The foundational right that needs to be defended is not necessarily freedom of expression, but the right to your body, the right to your person, the right to security, because in many ways I think that's what Wells embodied.
It must be disconcerting how I discombobule them all. I've always been the only, you're so unoriginal. Your words don't leave scars. Believe me, I've heard them all. I may be small, I may speak soft, but you can see the change in the water.
Wells's experience, and I think your book kind of presents this so powerfully, is that she's not only embattled by the increasing racism and the ferocity of applying that racism by the white society in the South and increasingly also in the North. She's also isolated within black communities. She's isolated within first wave feminist communities around temperance, around suffrage. All the time, people are looking at Ida B. Wells in part because she's this implacable force of telling the truth and saying that she's too inconvenient to be partnered with.
Yes.
And I want us to be sure to talk
about... Truth happens.
Yeah.
Like that. That's what happens with the truth. It's very inconvenient.
The power of this, torture survivors refusing to be silent also struck me as connected to Ida B. Wells' commitment to truth, and decades and decades of being denied the ability to tell their stories. Didn't stop them from keeping on telling their stories.
Our most recent reporting, led by Trina Reynolds Tyler, our director of data, is on missing Black women in the city. CPD says that 99.8% of missing cases are closed, non-criminal, essentially that everything is fine. And Trina, born and raised on the south side of Chicago, said, I have some questions about this police data.
But there's a sophistication now, not just among journalists, but among the public, that maybe that's not really what happened. Maybe something else
Deja vu,
happened.
a tough man. We go missing by the hundreds. Ain't nobody checking for us, ain't nobody checking for us. The camera loves us, Oscar doesn't. Ain't nobody checking for us, they want us in the kitchen. Kill our sons with lynchings. We get loud about it. Oh, now we're the bitches. Look at what they did to my sister last century, last week.
So
They
all of
put
a
her
sudden, it's
body
just
in
like,
a
wow,
jar.
we're really a threat just because we tell the truth. We uplift black people, and it's like this could be a threat to our lives. You know, we have to like learn all these safety protocols and all this insurance and stuff like that we didn't even know to have because we're just a scrappy group of black people telling the truth. And nobody cared when we were just telling black stories. But when it came to politics, when it was just like, oh, this can affect power shifting, it became like this is a life-threatening business that we're in.
I think it's something for us to reflect on now, that we celebrate people who embody this idea of freedom of thought. But we need to recognize that when you don't have protections, and she did not have protections in terms of her rights, you do that work, but you don't enjoy the fruit of that work, either in relation to security for self, livelihood for self, and the proper place that you should have in terms of leadership.
Please let us protect those people, and particularly not only, but particularly women, because they're really going to be confronted not just by racial issues, right, but by the intersection of racial and gender issues as well. And they're always very vulnerable to what Ida was.
Ida was a freedom fighter and she taught us how to fight. Rosa was a freedom fighter and she taught us how to fight. See, she's telepathic.
When you look at all the people in Ida's generation, you know, because she stuck to her guns, not everybody did. And some people weren't able to for all kinds of pressures and reasons. But she never compromised. And that gives a kind of satisfaction. And I was very moved when, you know, she made plans for her funeral. And she wanted the song sung. Many of you probably know it. She said, I want them to sing, I've done my work, at the end of her life. And when you think about it, isn't that something to be able to say that?
Absolutely.
For everything, I've done my work.
Absolutely.
The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. Ida B. Wells. In photos of you, every strand of hair, every pearl, every button feels intentionally placed, but no glove is too white to shake on a promise with a brother shooting dice in the alley. He is your kin too, same as the black boys buried in Mississippi air, the cold violence the South keeps quiet until you spill the ink. You dig beneath the lie we've been taught, that somehow we're always guilty, always whistling, too smiling, too sitting down, too upstanding, too breathing, being. Mother, sister, you would gather your race in your arms if you could. You pin the names of our martyrs on your chest. You light a torch in the basement of our country, find the old photographs, white grins gathered beneath brown bare feet, the kind of terror that makes a souvenir of itself, prints a postcard, brags about getting close enough to touch. You write to instill shame in the shameless. You write to call their twisted form of leisure by its name. Your hand holds pen to page, a match against powdered glass. They call you dangerous, most wanted for the crime of loving us too much. You light a flame in our chests. We boil over, reclaim our bodies, remember our worth, fly north, following your words, your promise. Light is a weapon, too. to